secret agent, thriller, enemy agent, action, double agent, adventure, counterintelligence, murder, infiltration, are all part of being in the Undercover podcast.
Welcome back into the house of mystery. I'm Al Warren. Mr. Joe Goldberg is in the house.
I'm in the house.
Yeah, it's dangerous. You know, we're talking
thrillers. As always, there's thrillers, then there's thrillers, and then there's above that there's Marc. So take your pick on that.
Yeah, he's a thrilling adventure.
Well, he's higher because he's in Alaska, so he automatically is higher than everybody else.
Is Alaska really higher than?
Feels higher. Yeah.
Well, it depends on how much you look at the globe. You know,
depends on.
But it's flat on the map. Looks higher to me. Yeah.
Yeah, but the globe's not real. We know it's flat, so there's no. Don't give me that. It's flat Earth, right?
Flat Earth, Alaska. It's
Yeah.
a TV show.
That's hilarious.
That's a new reality show. Flat Earth, Alaska.
It'd be 21 instead of 19. We need more reality TV shows up here, right?
Yeah.
That's what we need. More.
Keeps the economy going.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. I'm doing air quotes now when I say we need more reality.
I want more gold. I want gold. I hear there's gold up there. So I see it on TV.
Yeah, everywhere. It's on the streets.
Wow.
That's all you need to know.
That is all you need to know.
Mosquitoes are, they wear gold rings and gold necklaces.
Well, they're the size of hummingbirds.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Well, Marc, how have you been? It's been a while. You were on the last time you did a new book, and you got another new one out. This is called Bad River, and of course it's book 6 in the Arliss Cutter series. But what's been going on with Marc?
Oh, it's great. I'm working on the next one. It's funny when we do these, get to chat with old friends like this and talking about new books. And to me, it's an old book because I finished it over a year ago and I'm working on a new book. So people say, what happened in this chapter? I'm like, man, I can't remember. I know what's going on right now in my mind. But this was a fun one because I try to write standalone stories, but with overarching series plots. And Bad River ties up a lot of overarching plots and answers a lot of questions. Of course, we pop out some new ones, so there's new questions and mysteries to go forward. But this one was a fun one to write, an extremely fun book to write.
What do you find the most challenging thing to do in a series like that?
The most challenging thing, I think, I've talked to a lot of writers of series about this, is introducing the characters in a unique way so that somebody that picks up the book, maybe they pick up book 4 as their first introduction to Arliss and Grumpy and Mim and Lola and these characters, and they don't know them yet. And so you have to introduce them in each book so that it's not boring for the people that already know them, but also puts enough information out there so that new readers can go, oh, I like this person, or I hate this bad guy, or whatever. It's a little bit of a tightrope, but fun. It's a great exercise, and how can I describe this person differently than I did in the last book and still have the same general image in the reader's mind?
So what's the premise of this book? What have you got Arliss doing this time?
So over the course of 4 of the last 5 books, he's been pretty sure that somebody murdered his brother, that his death was an accident up on the North Slope in the oil fields in North Slope, Alaska, and where they're looking for a human trafficker in Anchorage at the same time that Oliver Tavers is looking for this person. Arliss gets some information that might lead him to answer who killed his brother and if he was actually murdered. And so there's 2 concurrent investigations that go back and forth, and we get to see. And in the meantime, see what's happening between Arliss and Mim, his widowed sister-in-law, who he's had a crush on since he was 16, since they were both 16 years old. So you could see what's going on there.
It's book 6. You say the standalone part of the series, book 6. Did you know what book 6 was when you started writing book 1? Did Arliss' future planned out, or did you just kind of go along and say he grew each time you wrote him?
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, I didn't know. I knew what had happened to his brother, but the characters have morphed. I didn't necessarily know how this is going to work out with Mim and Arliss. I didn't know. All I really knew is what happened to his brother, and how to get there it's a discovery with each book. And I didn't know what happened to his brother until book 2. it's a new discovery every book, and you learn as you go.
Mm-hmm. When you had his character, though, inside the book, what do you want the reader to discover in each book of your character? How they grow, how do they change?
Yeah, that's fun because what I try to do rather than, because I plot, I'm a heavy plotter. I know folks like Nick Petrie who says that he writes seat of the pants kind of writing, and I contend that he's just a super smart dude that has it all plotted in his head. I don't see how you can write a thriller or mystery like that. But but then I don't stick with the outline. I don't stick with my synopsis. I have a general idea when I write the synopsis for the editors, and I flesh that out for the outline. When I meander, I'll get to a point and go, oh, I'm going to go off this way. But and that's completely different from that's why sometimes when you see flap copy on a book, you're like, well, that's not what's going on in this book. And you're like, well, I don't know. Pay no attention to the flap copy. It's kind of what I try to do is I'm strict with myself, so the characters have to be themselves. And so I know what Arliss is. I've known Arliss my entire law enforcement career in my life. I know his grandfather Grumpy, and I know what he's going to do in a given situation. So I try to be true to those characters as I, plunk them down in whatever situation and have them react true to the way they would be. So when somebody sees Arliss in a just a car accident, say, he's going to act in a certain way. If he was in a bar fight, he's going to act a certain way. And I want Arliss to be one of those. When I think of Arliss Cutter, I think of that Marty Robbins song, Big Iron on His Hip. In fact, in the books, the chief deputy calls it Big Iron all the time because he wears a revolver, which is so odd in modern law enforcement. I just want people to know he's a good guy and he's going to be a good guy no matter what.
Yeah. When does he surprise you?
Oh, when he's tender, when he's, you see him interacting with his little nephews. He doesn't have any children, but he interacts with his little nephews, or he's interacting with this last book in Bad River. There's a particularly emotional scene that was, I know from knowing Arliss that that's the way he would have reacted. It's very emotional, and or in Stone Cross, there's some, which was book 2, there's some really emotional stuff in there and I know from being in law enforcement, and both my sons were in law enforcement for a time, and I think the most surprising thing to me was just, I know Arliss Cutter, I know people like Arliss Cutter, I know that even if you're a super tough man or woman in law enforcement, you're going to have emotions that don't necessarily run that deep, and it's just been it's been interesting to me when I watch Arliss or Jericho Quinn or Lola Tariki or any of these characters, how, you write these emotional kind of Tarzan-like thrillers, swing in and save the day kind of people, but how emotional they can get. And that's been fun and surprising.
Did you see Arliss becoming the character that he is now back when you started the whole series and working and creating Arliss? Did you see him being who he is now?
Somewhat, but I think you grow as you write and expose him to new situations. And I think the character that had the most formed in my mind was Grumpy, the grandfather that raised him. Because my grandfather didn't raise me. I had wonderful parents, but I spent a lot of time with my paternal grandfather, and he was a little guy, like 5'4" or 5'5", but tough as a boot, and owned a honky-tonk in West Texas when he was a young man, and had a bite mark on his ear, and he would tell me stories when I was like 9, and like, wow, Grandpa, you're cool. So I had a very, very clear image of what Grumpy was like, the man that raised Arliss and his brother Ethan. But Arliss I wouldn't say he's morphed, but I've discovered more of what he's like.
What do you find the hardest? Is it the emotional scenes, or is it the action scenes, or is there a particular scene or part of a story or chapter that you find the most challenging?
No, I love writing the action scenes, and I don't mind. I think the emotional scenes, I try to take great care in moving them along. I don't want this to be a romance. I certainly want it to stay an action book, but they're human characters that have human emotions, and I want to move them through those emotions. But I want to keep the pace and the tension going, so I don't want to spend too much time. So every emotional scene has to be high stakes. That's what I really strive for. But I really enjoy the action scenes. I mean, my son calls me a former action guy, not a current action guy, but I enjoy envisioning, okay, here's this cool vehicle pursuit that I was in years ago. Now let's make it even cooler. Let's ramp it up to where it's way cooler than anything I ever did. Plunk that down on the page, which makes it fun. But I don't know. I think the hardest thing is just slogging through the first draft, and then after that, it's polishing and tweaking and moving this around and just getting done. I enjoy writing action, but I enjoy going out and doing stuff more, and so I really have to focus myself. Okay, you can't research now for a year. You've got to actually write this book and get my butt in the chair.
So Joe's trying to write a really good thriller. What should he do? What advice would you give a person trying to write a book? One
of the best pieces of advice I got from my editor, Gary Goldstein. He was reading my first Jericho Quinn thriller, and he said, actually he was reading a Western, and he said, I want you to start with a massacre and build from there, whether it's literally or figuratively. And I try to start each book with something happening, something big happening, not just even though I write about Alaska and live in Alaska, I try not to talk about the weather too much in the very beginning, unless it's, freeze to death kind of weather, that kind of thing. But I like that advice, start with a massacre and build from there. Even though I don't massacre people in the first chapter, there's something big going on. My son, who was the police officer for a number of years, he was in college when the second Jericho Quinn novel came out, and we wrote a lot more back then, but he wrote me a letter, and it said that particular book's called Act of Terror, and he told me what was going on in his life, and at the end of the letter, he said, I just read Act of Terror, I found it in the library in wherever it was, Leeds or wherever, and he said, I hope that someday I can wheelie a Royal Enfield motorcycle into oncoming gunfire and save the girl. And I said, man, that is exactly what I want to emote when people read my book. So I want them to feel like they're wheeling a motorcycle into oncoming gunfire and saving the girl. I keep that little note by my computer so that if I'm not writing about that emotion, I'm doing something wrong.
Now, do you take a lot of your own backstories of your own life and own experience to create some of these scenes?
Oh, sure. I mean, like I say, Arliss is way cooler than I ever was. When you have a debate with someone, and then when you go home or the elevator door shut or whatever, and you think, man, I should have said that. Well, that's what I get to do as a writer. I get to take these conversations and altercations and conflicts and rewrite them. So my characters get to do the right thing and say the smartest things. But several of the altercations in the Cutter books specifically, several of the places, the people I've met and things, those make it, if not directly, at least sideways and on fire into these books.
What's the primary goal for you for writing? Or for the book, not for you, but for the book.
The primary goal of this book? Or I guess I don't get it.
Yeah, of writing for you. What is a book?
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, I guess to entertain myself. I enjoy the movie in my head. Of course, as time goes on, and it becomes to make the mortgage payment. But truly, my Robin Rue, my agent, she says the best muse is a mortgage payment. Get inspired now. But I just love to write. I've loved to write since I was 8 or 9 years old, writing fan fiction about boys with their dogs in South Texas or Central Texas, and because that's the kind of books I read. And so I just enjoy, when I read a book as a child, the way I processed that was to go write another story that was like Old Yeller or like Where the Red Fern Grows. And I guess I grew up processing what I was learning by writing stories about it, and I still do that. And I just enjoy sitting down. I write a lot longhand. It's kind of a ritual Steinbeck-esque Blackwing 603 pencils and sharpen a bunch of pencils down to write with a notepad, or I have a fountain pen my wife gave me 15 years ago, and I love writing with that. And I sit down and just a blank sheet of paper and pencils or a pen, a fountain pen, that's heaven to me.
So you did the first draft by hand, and you type it up?
Not the whole draft, but I plot by hand. I get my whole, then my synopsis is written by hand. My plots are all plotted out, free write. So I might fill up a notebook of just, free writing to me, the way my brain works, needs to be done by hand, because my brain just unlocks a certain way when I'm writing with a pencil or a fountain pen. And I'm kind of a snob when it comes to the kind of paper I write. I get a specific kind of paper that feels good with a fountain pen or these particular Blackwing pencils. So I spend a bunch of time plotting, and then I would say maybe a third of each book is written in longhand, because I don't like taking my computer to the beach very much. And we spend, a month or two every year in the South Pacific, and we have friends that give us a smoking deal on a place to stay. It sounds snobby when I go, yeah, we live in the South Pacific. It's not that way at all. Great people, though, and so I take my notepads and pencils or pen to the beach and so I might work on a chapter in the lanai or veranda, and then on the computer, and then the next day be down watching my wife snorkel, and I'm working, and I'll have my notepad and I'll write another chapter there. And then those chapters tend to be more highly polished in the first draft, because the first draft on a computer is the second draft of them. So I just write. I try to write. So I've written chapters on the back of my Alaska Airlines ticket, or scenes, I guess, because I didn't have anything else to write with when I was waiting at the airport.
As long as you don't lose them.
Yeah, but just having it written is funny. I lost a chapter recently. I thought I'd lost it on the computer. It ended up going in my documents instead of on my desktop. And I rewrote the chapter pretty soon after, like 2 days after. And when I found the old one, it wasn't identical, but it was pretty dang close. It's like once I've written it, just the turns of phrases I wanted to get in that chapter stay pretty close. It's sort of bizarre.
Can you remember ideas then? Like if you're driving or you're doing something and an idea comes to you, or some phrase or some, dialogue between characters or something. Do you have to write that down, or do you forget?
Oh, absolutely. No, absolutely. My mind is a steel sieve. I have to say it over and over and over. If I'm driving, I'll repeat, "Oh man, yeah, this is a cool piece of dialogue." Da 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 da. But once I write it down, I tend to remember it, even if the paper gets lost. But yeah, I have to write it down. I'll give myself I'll record a note sometimes, just on my phone. But many times I'll pull over and write something down. The problem is, if I'm trying to get from point A to point B and I pull over to write a note down, that note turns into 2 pages, and I'm late for wherever I was headed.
Then all of a sudden your truck is turned upside down on the road and backing up traffic.
Pull over. I don't do that.
Yeah. You pass Marc on the road. He's the guy talking to himself, saying over, and he's not listening.
Yeah,
he's not singing to the radio.
Muttering to myself. That used to be weird when you'd see people doing that with phones. Everybody's just talking to themselves anyway.
Yeah, it's hard to tell now if you're out in the street, people talking to themselves. They could be just normal talking on the phones nowadays, But
or weird people talking on the phones.
Yeah, you can't tell the difference. Yeah, let's just stay away from. Yeah, stay away from all of them.
Marc, are you going to bring the South Pacific into your Arliss Cutter world? Can you do it?
Yeah, I hope so. I think it has to be the right way. It has to keep the pace up. And we stay on the island of Rarotonga, which is in the Cook Islands, and it's just such a peaceful, idyllic place that when you try to inject suspense and violence, it's I don't know, it's hard to do. It's very hard to do, but I do have an idea that will probably happen in not the book I'm working on now, but maybe the book after that. We'll have to see. It has to be right, and I would love to be able to introduce some of those phenomenal characters that are the relatives of Lola Te Ariki and the inspirations for Lola Te Ariki that we meet when we're over there. So it could be fun. It could be very fun. We'll just make sure it feels organic to the reader, and not that I just, put Fonzie on a pair of water skis and have him jump the shark. There's a cultural reference for you.
Jump the moose. Well, you're Alaska, so you got to come on.
Yeah.
I can't keep Alaska jokes going.
Keep them coming.
So have you ever had ideas that you ended up not using, and what do you do with those?
Oh, keep a file. Absolutely. I got a boneyard file. I've had entire chapters that I've written, and sometimes you got to write 3 or 4 chapters to get to the first sentence of your book, and it's imperative that you wrote them. You had to write them to get them there, but they're just not. They just don't fit this book, or they're not what the reader needs to see. But you don't throw them away. I put them in a little boneyard file, and then just sometimes when I need a break, I'll read through that and go, oh, that's a cool little, that's a good little turn of phrase. I know exactly where I can use that. And, so absolutely all the time I'll have stoppy-starty stuff with a particular book, or, one of the things that I made an agreement with Tom Colgan when I was writing for the client, save anything back, that I wouldn't, as I'm researching, doing, whatever kind of research or chatting with folks in the military, that I wouldn't say, ooh, this is too good to use in a Jack Ryan book. I'm going to save it for a Jericho Quinn or a Cutter. And I don't do that. When I see something that's inspiring and I'm working on a book, that goes in the book. It fits. If it doesn't fit, then it might go in my boneyard. And honestly, research is that, you guys know this is right, is I might go to Argentina and research for 2 weeks, and 0.1% of what I learned goes in the book. But it all goes in my notes. But you can't really shoehorn in all the cool darlings you found out. It just doesn't work that way. But what all that research lets you do is to not write errors. I always tell people, you hear the old saw, write what you know, and I think it's more important to not write what you don't know. In other words, don't write about Alaska and put a mountain lion in it. We don't have mountain lions up here. But people think we do because the Northwest, or put elk walking down the middle of the road in Anchorage when we don't have elk. There's elk on 1 or 2 little islands in southeast Alaska that were introduced, but we don't have elk here. We have moose and caribou. So, don't write something I think writing something that's wrong is worse than trying to, that can really wreck a story if you're writing stuff you don't know.
Of course, all cities have cougars.
Yeah, everywhere, one way or the other. One way or another.
He's doubling time right there.
Yeah, but I'm thumbed. Yeah.
Boo. So when you leave a project and you go, let's say, researching or do stuff like that, when you come back to it, how do you get back into it? How do you get back into the same mindset that you had when you started writing a book?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The answer is I never leave it. Because I write longhand, it doesn't matter where I'm at. If I research during the day, I'm scribbling out sample scenes or chapters in the evening, and it's in my head all the time. So when my wife and I for the last Clancy, for instance, my wife and I took a cruise through the Panama Canal I thought I wanted to set the book in Colombia. We were walking around Cartagena and looking at it. I thought, well, this is cool. This will be a good scene. But when we got to Panama, I realized this is where most of it needs to happen. And so we got home, and I said, well, we were only in Panama 2 days. I'm going back. So I booked a ticket and flew back on my own for a week, and basically booked a bunch of trips that answered the questions that I needed answered that you couldn't necessarily get on a quick cruise ship tour. But wrote all the time, wrote in the evenings, wrote early in the mornings, just wrote, I had a college professor once that told me, he saw that I was spending a lot of time flirting with girls and hanging out and not doing, not really, he was a theater professor. I actually met my wife in a theater program in school. But this professor, he told me, he said, Marc, you're a talented guy, but you are never going to reach your full potential unless you can learn to use those 15-minute segments in your life that everybody else wastes because they think they're the in-between times. And I just really took that to heart. And when I have a few minutes, now, because I love to write, I write. A lot of times it's a letter to someone else or whatever. Or going up to Inupiaq in Bad River, I went up to used to be called Barrow. It's still called the Barrow Airport, but it's reverted to the native name, Utqiagvik. Went up there for a week, and in this book, there's a lot of mention of a polar bear. And when I got there, the first thing everybody wanted to show me was this humongous polar bear that was in an old shack, and he tried to chase him out of the shack, and he was so fat that his butt got caught in the door jamb. That's how big this polar bear was. And so obviously that's going to go in the book, because that's cool. That's a fabric of Arctic life, and when you go into basically any store, there's a sign when you leave that just says, be bear aware. You look out, poke your head out the door before you walk into the street. Obviously that's going to go, but I have to write that down. So when I'm inspired by that in the evenings, I'm going to write a polar bear scene, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Totally.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I'm going to ask you this question because I'm going to go to BoucherCon. This is a question kind of a panel I'm on. Is what do you think about readers when you're writing? How often are they looking over your shoulder?
Oh, yeah. I mean, both my parents had passed away fairly recently in the last couple of years, but my father had glaucoma for the last 8 years of his life. And so my mother had to read every word that I wrote out loud to my father. So you'll notice in my books that I don't ever drop the F-bomb. That's not because I'm a prude. It's because I just don't want my mom saying that stuff, right? Now she's passed away, and I've just gotten the habit. My readers expect that of my writing. So I think about, okay, here's a way that the Midwestern grandma, who's a big fan that writes me all the time, she's going to be able to take this level of violence or this level of conversation, but maybe not the other. So I have that kind of filter. But as far as what entertains the readers and the way I want to go to the stories, I try to just tell the story. And, I have a point A, maybe a midpoint and an ending point, and then rattle around in the middle to tell the most compelling story I can. And I don't worry too much about, I'm going to offend this person, or I'm going to entertain this particular block of people. Or Michael Jordan said, Democrats and Republicans both wear, tennis shoes. I don't want to get political. I don't want to be polarizing. I just but people are going to take offense one way or another. That's just life. If you have enough readers, somebody's going to get mad. But I can't worry too much about that. I just try to write an authentic, real story. One of the things I do take into account, though, is Alaska Native sentimentality. When I'm writing, I try to tell the most real story I can, but not encroach into their story. So if I'm writing about Tlingit people in Southeast, or Inupiaq people up north, or Yupik people in the West, I am cognizant that these are their stories, and I'm encroaching on that. So I want to write that kind of, I guess I look at that almost reverently. I want to, what I want to do when I write about in this book, for instance, there's, it happens up in Utqiagvik / Barrow, and much of it does. And so when I talk about the boys that find the body locked in the ice or something like that, I want to, the best thing that could happen in my mind is somebody reads this story and said, oh, I want to read about that whaling culture up in Utqiagvik and Wainwright and up on the Bering Sea and the Chukchi Sea, because I want to learn more about them from some of the stuff they've written. So I am cognizant of that.
You read reviews? Yeah,
I do not.
That's my panel.
Really?
Yeah, well, I think I'm kind of.
That would be a short panel if I was on it.
I know, me too. I don't read them.
Panel if I was on it. I think it's like knowing your own IQ. What good does it do you? You're like, oh wow, I'm super smart. Oh great. Or I'm dumb. Well, that makes me sad. So I'm glad to get reviews. I want people to write reviews. But as I said earlier, by the time a book comes out, I'm working on the next, or even sometimes the second 2 books later. So when somebody says, you spelled such and such wrong on page 98, I'm like, oh, thank you. All right.
You win.
Okay. Yeah, you win. Yeah. I feel like a puppy sometimes who peed on the carpet and they're holding my nose down in it. All right. You get to be the boss here. Touche. But even the good ones, I mean, I consistent. What I do look at is I look at what the stars are trending. So if and it's funny, it seems like people that write bad reviews are the first people to write reviews. So like with the Clancy's, I might have a 3-star average to start out, in the first couple of reviews, because people just want to, we're kind of a reviewing star-given culture now, I guess. But then it averages out. So I like to see, okay, if my books are averaging 4.5 stars, and I like to see that I'm getting reviews. If I'm getting Bad River, I think I checked this morning, it's got 400 and something, not ratings and reviews. They let you just put stars now instead of just writing reviews. And I'm happy about that. But what is the point? What I have done in the past is if I'm feeling really grouchy about the way my writing's turning out and it just doesn't feel right, I'll go back and find a book that I really like, one that one of my favorite books, whatever it is, and read their reviews and say, oh, look, people hated this one. I'm okay. I can go back.
Reviews are for other readers, right? Just leave it.
Yeah.
I think you're right. You look at the overall picture. Overall, you do 4 out of 5 stars, and you got like 1,000 reviews on something. That's fantastic. And it's just the point that people are buying it, and you're getting reviews. You go any further than that. I'm more interested in when, maybe this is just my age now, but when another writer says something good about me, that makes me feel good.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think that's important. And the emails, I do try to answer all the emails that I get, unless they're just mean. Some people will write. One lady took me to task the other day because I used the term snot. I said a snot slit rock. And boy, she was mad at me. Like, you'd think I'd have invoked the name of the Dark One or something. She was, I can't believe you use horrible language and you're just an awful person. And ma'am, I never even dropped the F-bomb in a book. What do you got? I'm surprised. Normally, I get an email like that, I just delete it. But I answered her because I was sort of caught in a fluff there. But
you tell her it was a snotty review.
Stop freaking scary. Yeah.
I wish you would have written a review because then I'd have never seen it. But every once in a while, you'll have somebody that like, I got a really, really nice email on an early Jericho Quinn, and this guy was a nuclear physicist, and he wrote me a very nice, effusive email about my writing, and he said, I just want to let you know that you got the half-life of plutonium-2 whatever wrong. You inverted the numbers from 85,000 years to 58,000 years. And I wrote back and I said, dude, I am just mea culpa, but I'm just so pleased that a nuclear physicist is reading these and enjoying these over-the-top adventure books. And so I love getting stuff like that. That's fine. I know that I'm going to make an error here and there. Reviews, no.
Well, it's all where it comes from, too, right? What kind of life is that person living that, what's their circle like? Where are they living, and what's normal to them, and what, the word snot, for instance, that might be something that. Yeah, right.
Oh yeah, my grandmother would smack me if I said the word pregnant. That was a no-go word.
Yeah, I'll bleep that.
Yeah, that has to go. That's disgusting.
Sorry.
Behavior.
You don't want the FCC fining you for me saying pregnant.
Yeah, just disgusting. No, you can say almost anything nowadays. It's terrible. It's crazy. Well, and one more. The one question is, I think you're pretty observant, and you're pretty caring, I think, when you write and when you do things. How is it that you, or maybe you don't, but when real life events happen, like death, like for instance, I've just gone through that recently, but when you have traumatic things happen in your real life, in your own life, can you separate that, or does it get absorbed into the books, or do you use it, in fact, to create an atmosphere, for instance, in a character or maybe a scene?
I think, for me, I can't speak to anyone else, but to me, I think it would be impossible not to absorb it. I mean, the stuff that comes out of your pen, going back to that question you asked earlier about, advice, tell one thing about writing a book. I think I tell people when they're writing that you're showing your book to someone should give you the same feeling as if you answer the door in your underwear. You're not indecent, but you know what? This is old underwear, and you kind of might be, and you're kind of peeking around the door, and you're a little bit nervous. You're really showing a lot of your inner self. And I think whether it's, death or romance or anything that really hits us deeply, it becomes part of us. My mother passed away last year while I was finishing up the draft of Bad River. And, so, I hope it doesn't come across as maudlin or anything, but there is some, I'm sure some emotion is in there, and, it might not be, might not have been otherwise. And, I think every writer has a unique voice. And, I think I could pick up a Marc Graney book and without, just reading a couple of chapters without knowing the title or anything. And, even if the names are changed, and say, oh, wow, this is a Marc Graney book. Nick Petrie has a unique voice. I like to read his stuff. I'm going to appear with both of those guys. Kent Kruger, the three writers that I'm going to appear with on this book tour, they all have unique voices, and that I think is a function of how we live and who we are and what's going on with our life at the same time. The very first Cutter book deals with Open Carry, deals with a young Tlingit Native woman in Southeast Alaska, and it's not integral, a big part of the plot, but she is getting over breast cancer and how she's got her new normal, and kind of wearing shirts that are a little bit baggy, and her hair is kind of chopped off because she had chemo. And my wife went through that years and years and years ago when our children were quite small, and my wife was just barely 30 years old when she went through that exact same process. And so I didn't write a book about it for a long time, and I got her permission and actually just quizzed her a lot about what it was like from that, that inside looking out for that kind of a character. And definitely that experience went into writing the book. So
social media, website, where do people find Marc?
Yeah, so I'm at Marc Cameron Books, my website, and then just Marc Cameron Author on Facebook, and Marc Cameron Books on Instagram. I'm not as active as I probably should be on social media because I'm too busy writing. But during this window of book release time, I'm on there quite a bit, just hopefully interacting with people that along the tour trail. But mostly when I post on social media, it's usually about my grandkids or Alaska or some combination of those things. I feel like if I talk too much about buy my book, here's some writing stuff I've done, it can get old to me. So people want to reach out to me. I love interacting with readers, though. I do enjoy that.
Okay, fantastic. We'll have all of that on our website as well. And we appreciate you being here.
This is fun. This is great fun. You guys ask great questions.
That's all Joe.
It's all Al. He's just imagining you in the hotel room in Juneau. That's his.
Yeah, and Joe's wearing his underwear. That's how he interviewed him.
That's funny.
Yeah.
It's not that funny, believe me.
Yeah. Bad River is the book, Marc Cameron.
Hey, thank you.
Thanks, Marc.
This has been a production of the House of Mystery Radio Show. To find out more about our show, guests, or hosts, go to our website at houseofmysteryradio.com.